The heavy glass doors of Whitmore Enterprises swung open, but it wasn't a board member or an investor walking through. It was a little girl, no taller than the desk she was about to stand in front of. "Excuse me, sir." Her tiny voice broke the silence of the CEO's office. "I came to work for my mummy today. She's sick and had to go to the hospital." Robert Whitmore froze mid-sentence, the pen slipping from his hand. Mondays were for spreadsheets, forecasts, and meetings stacked one after another. Not this. Not a 5-year-old in an oversized janitor's uniform, standing there with her chin lifted like she belonged. The fluorescent light seemed to halo around her golden curls. The uniform was far too big, sleeves rolled to her elbows, pants cinched at the waist with a shoelace. In one hand she clutched a spray bottle, in the other a rag folded neatly in half. "My name's Amy," she said proudly, her voice steady despite the weight of the room. "My mummy's name is Pamela. She works here, but she's really sick today, so I came instead. I know what she does. She told me." Robert blinked, waiting for the punchline, the hidden camera's something. But there was nothing in her eyes except determination, pure, unwavering. She believed this was her mission. He rose slowly, not wanting to frighten her. "Amy," he asked gently, "how did you even get here?" She looked down at her scuffed pink sneakers. "I took the bus. Mummy showed me the stops. I used the quarters from my piggy bank." Robert's chest tightened. "You took the bus alone?" Amy nodded. "I remembered the building. It's the really tall one with shiny glass and your company's name in gold letters. One time we passed it, and I told Mommy I wanted to be a CEO here one day." She laughed. "But I meant it." Something inside Robert softened. She kept going, her words steady, each one sharper than the last. "This morning Mommy couldn't get up. She said her chest hurt. I gave her water and told our neighbor to call for help. But Mommy told me if she misses work again, she might lose her job, so I came. I didn't want her to get in trouble." Robert lowered himself back into his chair, hands folded tightly. He'd faced billion-dollar negotiations without blinking. Yet here he was, undone by a little girl's love for her mother. "You came here to save your mom's job," he said quietly. Amy nodded, her eyes shining. "She's the hardest worker. She's the best mommy." Robert let out a long, shaky breath. Somehow this child had crossed the city, slipped past security, taken the elevator all the way up, and walked into his office, not for mischief, not for attention, but for love. A kind of love fierce, innocent, and unshakable. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Whitmore, your finance meeting begins in 5. Robert pressed the button without hesitation. "Cancel it, sir. Just this one. All of them. Clear my morning." "Yes, sir." He turned back to Amy. "Are you hungry?" She tilted her head, shrugged. "Do you have apple juice?" A corner of his mouth twitched. "I think I do." He opened a hidden fridge behind the wall panel and pulled out a small bottle. Amy accepted it with both hands, whispering, "Thank you," before climbing onto the bench by the window. Her little legs swung back and forth as she sipped, gazing at the sprawling city below. Robert watched her quietly. Against that skyline, she looked impossibly small. Yet she had walked into his world with more conviction than most grown adults ever did. Something in his gut told him this wasn't chance. This was the start of something bigger. And miles away, a young mother lay in a stark hospital bed. Pamela Morgan was only 24, but her weary eyes carried the weight of a life lived twice over. Her beauty, once effortless, radiant, was now hidden beneath a hurried bun. Her soft smile stretched thin beneath exhaustion. Not long ago, she had been the rising star of her computer science program, celebrated for her brilliance and creativity. She dreamed of building a startup, of chasing innovation in Silicon Valley. But those dreams shattered the day she met him. He was older, charming, full of promises. She was young, hopeful, and unprepared for heartbreak. By the time she realized his love was hollow, she was staring at a pregnancy test with trembling hands. When she told him, he vanished. When she told her parents, their disappointment cut deeper than his absence. "You're throwing your life away," her father snapped. Her mother wept, begging her to end it. But Pamela had already heard the heartbeat inside her. That was enough. 1 week later, she was disowned, cast out with 2 bags, no safety net, and a baby on the way. The world outside was colder than she ever imagined. Pamela's life after being cast out was a blur of survival. She slept on borrowed couches, worked any job she could, scrubbing floors, babysitting strangers' kids, waiting tables until her feet bled. Her body ached under the strain of pregnancy, but every night as exhaustion pressed heavy on her, she placed her hand over her belly and whispered, "I'll never leave you. No matter what happens, I'll always be here." And then, on a storm-soaked January night, her promise took form. In a crowded, noisy hospital with no family by her side, a nurse gently placed a tiny, pink-faced newborn into her arms. Amy. The moment Pamela saw her daughter, it was as if the rest of the world fell silent. That night was the beginning of everything. The years that followed were a grind. Slowly, painfully, Pamela pieced her life back together. The janitor position at Whitmore Tower wasn't glamorous, but when she got it, she accepted with quiet gratitude. It meant a steady paycheck, health insurance, and stability, the very things she'd been fighting for since Amy's birth. The work was brutal. Long nights cleaning after executives had gone home, scrubbing stains that never fully vanished, learning which elevators groaned on the way down, memorizing every inch of the skyscraper that loomed over the city. No one bothered to learn her name, but the building gleamed because of her hands. Pamela grew thin, not from dieting, but from making sure Amy always had the bigger portion. Her immune system weakened from skipped meals and sleepless nights. By winter, her cough wouldn't go away. She brushed it off at first. She had no choice. But one morning, the pain stabbed so sharply in her chest that she couldn't stand. The room spun. She collapsed back into bed, Amy's tiny hand wrapped around hers. "Mommy, you're sick," Pamela tried to answer, but her voice cracked into a rasp. Their neighbor, Mrs. Collins, heard the wheezing and dialed for help. Sirens followed. Soon Pamela was lying under the harsh lights of an ambulance, her chest rising with shallow, ragged breaths. Machines beeped around her in the hospital. Doctors spoke in clipped tones. Oxygen levels, lung inflammation, further tests. But Pamela barely heard. Her mind wasn't on her failing health. It was on rent due in a week, on groceries she hadn't yet bought. On the job she was already in danger of losing. She had given up her family, her future, her education, everything for Amy. To lose it all now to something as cruel and uncontrollable as illness? Panic spread like fire in her chest. She lay there staring at the ceiling, whispering a desperate plea into the void. "Please, don't let me lose everything I've fought for." What Pamela didn't know was that fate had already shifted. At that very moment, Amy was pulling on her mother's oversized uniform. With sleeves rolled and a rag clutched in one hand, the little girl was pushing open the gleaming glass doors of Whitmore Tower. Her tiny steps were already rewriting destiny. Back in the CEO's office, Robert Whitmore had cancelled an entire morning of meetings. For once, he didn't feel the gnawing guilt of lost time or missed opportunities. Something about the girl perched by his window, sipping apple juice with her legs swinging above the floor, made time itself irrelevant. He watched as she tipped the bottle back for the final drop, then carefully wiped her mouth with her sleeve. Her gaze wandered the office wide with curiosity. "Is it hard, being the CEO?" she asked softly. Robert allowed himself a faint smile. "Some days it is. There's a lot to take care of." Amy nodded, as though she understood more than a child her age should. "Mommy says when you take care of something really big, you have to remember the little things too." The words caught Robert off guard. They didn't sound like a 5-year-old. They sounded like wisdom, wrapped in pigtails. Setting the empty bottle carefully on his desk, Amy stood up straight. "I think I should start now," she said seriously. "Mommy always starts with your desk. She says the big man upstairs should have a clean start to his day." Robert raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as she reached into her tiny bag and pulled out a travel-sized pack of tissues. With delicate fingers, she peeled one out, placed it neatly across her palm, and stepped toward his desk like a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. Slow, circular motions, tiny hands working with intent, mimicking what she had seen but never practiced. The effort was almost comically ineffective, barely shifting a speck of dust, but her expression was all business. No playfulness, no pretense. Just focus, pride, and determination. Robert leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving her. "You're very dedicated, Amy," he murmured. She looked up, a smile breaking across her face, small but radiant. Amy looked up, her voice soft but steady. "Mommy says when you do something, you should do it right, even if nobody sees you." The words, so simple yet profound, cut through Robert like a blade. They cracked something open inside him, a piece of himself he thought had long been buried under years of isolation and relentless ambition. Then it happened. As Amy leaned across the desk to wipe near his laptop, her small arm brushed against a tall glass of water. The glass trembled once, twice, then toppled. The crash echoed through the office. Water cascaded across the polished wood, racing dangerously toward a stack of financial projections worth millions. Amy froze. Her eyes widened in horror, her hands hovering in midair. I'm sorry," she gasped, her voice shaking. "I didn't mean to. I was just trying to help. Please, please don't fire Mommy. I was only trying to help." Robert reacted instantly, snatching a pile of napkins and blotting the spreading water before it touched the folder. Then he turned toward her. Amy's bottom lip trembled. Tears pooled in her wide eyes. She had dropped the tissue and stepped back, bracing herself for punishment, rejection, something harsh. Instead, Robert knelt beside her, lowering himself until his gaze met hers. His voice was gentle, warm. "Hey," he said, placing a napkin in her tiny hand. "It's okay." Her whisper was barely audible. "But I messed it up." "No," Robert said firmly, with a small smile tugging at his lips. "You didn't. You were doing your best, and that's what matters." She searched his face, uncertain, still afraid. He added, "Amy, today you've done more than most people twice your size, and for the record, you're the youngest employee I've ever had." The corner of her mouth lifted, the faintest spark of hope lighting her eyes. "Really?" "Really," Robert assured her. "And I think you're doing a great job." A tiny breath escaped her lungs, shoulders loosening as the fear melted away. She nodded solemnly, then dabbed the desk one more time, carefully wiping away the last stubborn drop of water. Robert rose to his chair, something shifting inside him. Connection. Small, fragile, but real. This little girl in her oversized uniform and honest eyes had walked into his empire and reminded him of something he had nearly forgotten. Kindness. Humanity. And as she cleaned with new confidence, Robert leaned back, feeling a spark stir in his chest, strange but comforting. The very next morning, Robert found himself staring at a spreadsheet that should have consumed him. But the numbers blurred, meaningless. His mind kept drifting back to a little girl with golden curls, pink sneakers, and a voice too brave for her years. He needed to know more, not for business, not for protocol, but because something inside him refused to let it go. He buzzed his assistant. "Find out which hospital Pamela Morgan was taken to yesterday morning. I need her room number." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, should I send flowers?" "No," Robert said quietly, his tone leaving no room for debate. "I want to visit her." By late afternoon, Robert stood outside a modest hospital room on the 5th floor of St. Mary's. Through the narrow window he saw her, Pamela Morgan. Pale, yes. Fragile, no. Even in illness, there was a quiet resilience in the way her hand rested across her stomach, fingers curled slightly. Her face was turned toward the window, eyes open but distant. The sunlight caught her golden hair, messy yet luminous. He knocked gently. She turned her head, confusion flickering across her features, until recognition dawned. "You're the CEO," she whispered, trying to sit up. "Mr. Whitmore," she added quickly, cheeks coloring with embarrassment. Robert stepped in, raising a calming hand. "Please, don't get up." Pamela obeyed but looked uneasy. I'm so sorry about Amy. She didn't mean, He shook his head, cutting her off. She did nothing wrong. Pamela blinked, caught off guard by the warmth in his voice. I met Amy yesterday, Robert continued, pulling the chair closer to her bed. She walked into my office like she owned the place, told me she was there to work for you. Pamela covered her mouth with a trembling hand. Oh my God. She even brought a rag and a spray bottle. Pamela let out a soft, breathless laugh that sounded halfway between amusement and tears. She always pays attention. I didn't know she told you everything. She told me you were sick, that you might lose your job. She thought if she cleaned my desk I wouldn't be mad. Pamela lowered her eyes, guilt washing over her. I told her too much. No, Robert said gently. You taught her how to care. Silence hung heavy between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with something unspoken. Finally, Pamela asked, her voice cautious, What else did she tell you? The best mommy in the world. Pamela's breath caught at the words, whispered from her daughter's lips, retold now by the CEO himself. Robert leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I wanted to hear your side too. Pamela hesitated, her eyes guarded, then gave a small nod. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight of truth. She told him everything. How she had once been a computer science student with big dreams. How she had fallen for someone who vanished the moment responsibility appeared. How her own family, people meant to love her, turned their backs when she chose life over convenience. She painted the picture of years wandering from place to place, Amy balanced on one hip, determination on the other. I thought if I could just find one steady job, we'd be okay, she admitted. When I got the position at Whitmore Tower, it was the first time I could actually breathe. I never cared who owned the building, only that I had to keep it. And you did, Robert said softly. Her eyes flicked up, searching his face. He wasn't at all what she expected, not cold or untouchable, but present, sincere. There was something unguarded in his gaze, something she hadn't seen in anyone for a very long time. You must think I'm reckless, she whispered, shame threading her tone, letting my daughter go out alone like that. No, he replied firmly. I think you've done more with less than most people ever have to. Pamela blinked, caught off guard. Her eyes shimmered, glassy with the emotion she kept buried. Then, with no theatrics, just quiet conviction, Robert said the words that would stay with her forever. You're the strongest person I've ever met. The dam inside her cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She turned her head slightly, embarrassed, trying to hide the trembling of her shoulders. Robert didn't look away. He didn't try to fix it or offer empty reassurances. He just stayed, his silence saying more than words ever could. I'm sorry, she whispered, brushing hastily at her tears. Don't be, he said softly. It was the first time in years someone had called her strong and meant it. The first time someone looked past the uniform, past the scars of her past, and simply saw her, Pamela. Not a janitor, not a mistake. Just her. And in that quiet hospital room, something shifted for both of them. Something changed after that visit. Robert told himself it was professional courtesy, just residual concern. But the truth followed him long after he left. He began walking hallways he'd never cared about before. Maintenance corridors, supply closets, stairwells, the forgotten veins of the tower he ruled. Spaces that suddenly mattered because they belonged to her. 2 weeks later, Pamela returned to work. She was thinner, still pale, but steady, moving with quiet purpose. Her head down, her steps efficient, and Robert, the man whose days were planned to the minute, started making unscheduled detours. He lingered near restrooms under the guise, of reviewing cleanliness, paused by stairwells to check reports. In truth, he was just looking for her. Sometimes he saw her bent over a sink, polishing glass until it shined. Other times she was pushing a mop, strands of golden hair slipping loose against her tired face. Every time, something inside him stilled. One morning on the landing between the 19th and 20th floors, he caught sight of her struggling with a heavy, sloshing bucket. The handle cut into her fingers as she carefully climbed each step. Before she could protest, Robert stepped forward and lifted it from her hands. Pamela startled, her eyes flashing upward. "Mr. Whitmore," she breathed. "Let me," he said simply, already carrying the bucket up. She hesitated, torn between correcting him and thanking him, but he was already at the top, setting it down gently. "I was just on my way to check the HVAC reports," he added, his excuse paper-thin. She gave him a small smile. "Of course you were." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat neither looked away. Something passed between them, quiet but undeniable. Pamela broke it first, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek before disappearing into the stairwell. The next afternoon, when she returned to the janitor's closet on the 15th floor, she found a neatly folded white towel resting on her cart. On top of it was a yellow sticky note in handwriting she instantly recognized. "Don't forget to wipe your brow." Some of us noticed the effort. Our Pamela stood frozen, the towel pressed to her chest. She had never received a love note before. Not like this. Not simple, not kind, not care dressed as charm. She tucked the note into the pocket of her uniform and told no one. From then on, their encounters stayed brief, sometimes only a nod in passing, sometimes just a glance. But each one lingered, heavy with meaning neither dared put into words. The mop glided across the marble floor, its rhythm the only sound in the deserted executive hallway. Pamela worked quietly, head bent, when Robert's office door opened. He stepped out, pausing in the doorway. She lifted her eyes, their gazes locked, neither daring to move. Seconds ticked by, heavy with something unspoken, awareness, warmth, maybe even longing. The moment startled them both. Pamela dropped her eyes quickly. "Good evening, sir," she murmured, hurrying away. Robert watched her retreat down the hall, small but steady, every step tugging at him. Behind the storage closet door, Pamela leaned against the shelves, her hand pressed to her chest. Her heart thumped wildly. She bit her lip, fighting a grin, but the smile broke free anyway. Pulling out the towel he'd left her days before, she whispered, "Get a grip, Pam." But the warmth in her chest refused to fade. Across the hall, Robert stood behind the glass wall of his office, her shadow vanishing from view. His fingers curled against the frame of the door, his jaw tightening. She's kind, strong, real. He had spent years surrounded by polished surfaces and hollow conversations, people who wanted his title, never his truth. But Pamela, she was different, no pretense, no act. Just grit, grace, and a quiet fire that humbled him. Without realizing it, he whispered aloud what had already rooted itself deep inside his chest. "I think I'm falling for her." But just as their fragile, unspoken bond began to bloom, the past came knocking. His name was Daniel Carter. Pamela hadn't seen him in over 5 years, since the night she told him she was pregnant, and he walked away without looking back. She had buried every hope of apology long ago, but nothing could have prepared her to see him leaning casually against the marble reception desk of Whitmore Tower, smirk curling his lips as though he belonged there. "I heard you work here," Daniel drawled. "And I heard the CEO's got quite the soft spot for his janitor." Pamela froze, ice racing through her veins. "What do you want?" He leaned closer, voice oily. "A second chance, or maybe the first real chance to be part of Amy's life. Don't you think I deserve that?" Her hands trembled, but her words were sharp. "You left. You never called. You don't deserve anything." His smirk twisted, hardening into something cruel. "I also heard Robert Whitmore is generous with people he cares about. Maybe he could be generous to me too." Pamela's stomach dropped. You're not here for her. You're here for money, Daniel shrugged. Or options. Either way, if people start asking questions about your special relationship with the boss, I doubt your position here stays secure. She turned on her heel and walked away, refusing to give him another word. But it was too late. Within days, the whispers began. Did you hear about the janitor and the CEO? They say he visits her cleaning station every night. He even canceled a board meeting for her. In most companies, rumors came and went like weather. But in Robert's world, billion-dollar mergers and razor-thin margins, every whisper carried a price. The board of directors convened an emergency meeting. You're compromising your objectivity, one accused. This woman is a liability, another snapped. There are murmurs in the press, the chairman warned. If she stays, we risk reputational damage. Investors don't like complications. You need to distance yourself immediately. Robert sat silent, jaw locked, fingers steepled. He listened as their voices clashed around the room, and when the last warning fell into the air, he rose to his feet. Let me make this clear, he said, voice calm yet thunderous in its certainty. If Pamela Morgan is being targeted, disrespected, or pushed out of this company because of her association with me, then I will be the first to leave. Effective immediately. The room froze. Silence stretched. Robert's gaze swept the table sharp as a blade. She is not a liability. She is a human being, a mother, one of the hardest working employees we have. And more importantly, his voice softened, but the truth rang like steel. She is the woman I love. Gasps rippled through the boardroom. I will not tolerate cruelty disguised as corporate policy, he continued. And if this company loses a little comfort in the process, then so be it. For a long, stunned moment, no one spoke. Then one by one, heads lowered. No one dared challenge him, and word of that meeting spread like fire through Whitmore Tower. Pamela's hands trembled as she shoved supplies into her cart, the janitor's closet suddenly feeling too small, too suffocating. Her heart pounded when Robert appeared in the doorway. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything, she whispered, blinking back tears. This job, this company, you've built it all. You've worked too hard. Robert stepped closer, his presence steady, his voice soft but unshakable. You are not the reason, Pamela. You're the anchor. The first thing in a long time that's made me feel like a man again, not just a position. Her tears slipped free, rolling down her cheeks. But you stood up for me, she breathed. He smiled faintly. You stood up for Amy day after day. You didn't think anyone noticed, but I did, and now, so does everyone else. For the first time, she believed him, fully, completely, because in a boardroom where power ruled and titles commanded respect, Robert Whitmore had risked everything, not for profit, but for her, and in that moment her heart finally felt safe. But Robert knew the storm wasn't fully gone. Daniel was still a threat, and he refused to let Pamela fight that battle alone. Quietly, he hired one of the state's fiercest family law attorneys, a woman known for protecting single mothers and dismantling men who tried to manipulate the system. Together, they built Pamela's case. Years of school records, medical bills, employment history, proof of a mother who had raised her child with nothing but grit and dignity. When Daniel finally swaggered into the preliminary hearing, smug and cocky, he expected an easy win. But the sight of Robert seated in the back row, calm, unflinching, watching every move, made the smirk falter. And when the attorney laid out the truth with precision, his arrogance crumbled piece by piece. 3 days later, Daniel quietly withdrew his petition. He never contacted Pamela again. With that shadow gone, Robert turned his attention toward something brighter, Pamela's future. He remembered her quiet confession, her love for software, her unfinished degree, her dream of building something meaningful. And so he created a position just for her, technical advisor for digital transformation. At first, Pamela hesitated. I haven't touched code in years. I don't even know where to start. Robert smiled, sliding a laptop across the desk. Start here with us. We don't just need skill. We need someone who understands people. Someone who knows what it means to build from the ground up. With mentoring sessions, online courses, and the company's full support, Pamela stepped into her new role. On her first day, dressed in a simple navy blouse, hair falling softly around her shoulders, she looked less like a janitor and more like the woman she had always been meant to become. And she was brilliant. She asked questions no one else thought to ask, questions about how technology affected the overlooked, the late-night crews, the cleaners who were once her peers. Within weeks, she had redesigned the company's maintenance software, cutting response times in half. For the first time, colleagues stopped her in hallways not for supplies, but for solutions. And through it all, Amy bloomed. Every afternoon after preschool, she skipped through the lobby as if she owned it, waving at security guards, dropping off crayon drawings at Robert's office, riding on his shoulders during lunch breaks. One day in the elevator, she spun in a circle and giggled. "This place smells like mommy and smiles now." To Robert, nothing had ever sounded truer. At first, they were cautious, dinners here, quiet walks there. But slowly, the boundaries blurred in the most natural way. Pamela would stay late tinkering with prototypes. Robert would appear with coffee exactly the way she liked it. Amy started with Mr. Robert, then just Robert. And one night, without thinking, she called him Dad. Pamela froze, eyes wide, but Robert's gaze was already wet with tears. He didn't correct her. He only whispered, voice breaking, "I'd be honored." There was no grand declaration, no staged romance, just slow, steady steps, woven with tenderness, resilience, and quiet joy, until the three of them became something far more powerful than titles or wealth. A family. And in the small, ordinary moments, morning coffees in the cafe downstairs, Amy's laughter bouncing through the marble halls, Pamela leaning her head against Robert's shoulder in the elevator, they found what none of them even knew they'd been searching for. Home. 1 year later, Pamela stood on stage, facing an auditorium filled with tech leaders, journalists, and flashing cameras. Behind her glowed a massive screen displaying Whitmore Enterprises' brand new internal task management system, her project, her vision. She had led the team from sketch to launch. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. It worked for everyone, executives, assistants, janitors, just as she dreamed when she was still pushing a mop through those same halls. As the final slide faded, applause thundered. Her hands shook, not from fear this time, but from pride. The next morning, headlines exploded, from janitor to visionary, a system built on empathy. Pamela barely skimmed the articles. The only review she cared about was the look on Robert's face backstage. He pulled her into his arms and whispered, "You did it." She smiled through tears. "We did." From behind the curtain came the sound of tiny feet racing. "Mommy, you were amazing!" Amy squealed, launching into her arms. "Did you watch the whole thing?" Pamela laughed, lifting her. "I did, and I didn't even fall asleep once." Their laughter echoed together. Weeks later, when job offers poured in from across the country, Pamela stayed. Not for security, not for salary. She stayed because Whitmore had become more than a company. It was purpose. It was family. Spring arrived. The city thawed, flowers bloomed, and Saturday mornings became their sacred ritual. One such morning, Robert invited Pamela and Amy to a quiet picnic in the park. Pamela expected nothing more than sunlight and sandwiches, but under the shade of a tall oak, after unpacking lunch, Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Pamela froze. He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. He simply took her hand, placed the box in her palm, and opened it. Inside was a simple gold ring crowned with a single sapphire. "I don't need cameras or a grand ceremony," he said softly. "I just need you, Amy, this life we've already started. Pamela Morgan, will you marry me?" Her eyes flooded with tears. She couldn't speak, but her nod was answer enough. Amy, chasing butterflies nearby, noticed and ran over. "Mommy, why are you crying?" "Happy tears," Pamela whispered, laughing. Robert bent down, pulling Amy between them. "What do you think, sweetheart? Should we make it official?" Amy grinned, grabbed both their hands and shouted, "Yes!" "Mommy always says superheroes don't wear capes. But Mr. Robert, you're ours, right?" Pamela looked at him with tears shimmering in her eyes. He always has been. Robert's voice cracked as he whispered, I love you both more than anything I've built, or owned, or dreamed of. Amy squeezed their hands. Then can we go home now? Together. That evening, Robert stood on the balcony of their apartment, watching the city lights flicker. Inside, Pamela and Amy sat cross-legged on the floor, piecing together a puzzle, their laughter rising like music. And in the quiet of his heart, Robert whispered the truth he had carried since the day a little girl in an oversized janitor's uniform walked into his office. I thought they needed saving, but it was me. They didn't need rescuing, I did. And in choosing love over power, presence over pride, I finally found what I had been searching for all along. The screen faded to black. The last image, Pamela. Robert and Amy, arms wrapped around each other, bathed in golden spring light, a family not built by wealth or chance, but by resilience, courage, and the quiet power of love. Voiceover, outro. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, we invite you to become part of our family here at HOA-GLORIOUS Stories. We share real, emotional, and inspiring tales that remind us of the miracles hidden in everyday life. Stories of resilience, of love, of the unbreakable human spirit. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Because sometimes all it takes is one story to change the way you see the world.